Thank you, Sanjay ji, and thank you, Krishan Khan, for that long introduction. Much of which was unnecessary. Anyway, Sanjay ji told me to point out to him the theme of the lecture, and I have kept it as public discourse, popular culture, and the status of Indian cinema. I'm sure much of what is there in the theme, at least the words you understand somewhat, but if you look a little deeper into the meanings of these words, then you would, the natural question in your mind would be, what is the interrelation between them, amongst them? Anyway, I've had a long relationship with the world of cinema, spanning over the last 30-40 years, as a spectator, as a viewer, as a teacher, as a maker, and even today as somebody who participates in discussions and contributes to seminars related to cinema. So one inevitable element of cinema or films has stayed as part of my habit or as part of my nature, and that is storytelling. Because the essence of cinema, I think, is storytelling, but that itself has undergone several mutations in terms of its interpretations. But I would like to start my lecture with a small story. This is about 15-20 years back, about 17-18 years back. I was at the Cannes Film Festival, and the Cannes Film Festival is the largest media event after the Olympics. So it's not very easy to wind your way through the maze of viewing platforms out there. And there is this main hall where a lot of these films in competition and other sidebars are screened. And it is there that the so-called red carpet is laid out, and all these photographs that you see of celebrities climbing up the stairs to that big hall, it's all there. So it is not very easy to find an entry into that hall, although that hall is big enough, but it cannot still accommodate everyone coming as delegate to the festival. And it's a huge festival. It's the biggest festival, biggest cinema event in the world. So, and there's a certain prescription about the dress that you need to wear in those screenings there, the main screening in the hall. Well, I was not carrying that dress, and I thought, well, I'll wear a kurta pajama, a long kurta, and a chudidar pajama, and wear sandals and go up there. And I did not ever imagine that there would be a problem with that particular dress. So I went up, and when I asked for passage to be given, I was stopped right at the gate. So I don't speak French. I asked him why. He just, told me, come aside. He said, no, you can't go. You can't go like this. So I said, what? This is amazing. He said, no, you're not wearing a bow tie. And a bow tie is compulsory for you to wear out there. I was really hassled. I was angry beyond words. I said, these French people who, gave the slogan of liberty, equality, and fraternity to the world, these people who I assumed would be so very internationalist in their outlook, they are stopping me from wearing my sort of national dress. So I couldn't do anything there because, in front of that brute power, you just can't do anything. So I went back, and then I headed straight to the press room. And in the press room, I found a few of these reporters, chugging away at their typewriters, and I said, "Look, this is what has happened to me. Do you think this is something which you can report?" So a couple of them listened very patiently and said, "Okay, we'll do something about it." Anyway, it did not create a flutter, not the least bit of flutter. The reason why I was referring to this, why I told you this story is that here is a story which tells you about that nation. The pride that nation takes in actually imposing a certain uniformity in terms of discipline about their celebratory events. And the Cannes Film Festival is indeed a celebratory event. It's a celebration of cinema, as most filmmakers across the world admit and would like to be a part of. So the reason why I was referring to this story is that this whole notion of nation, pride in our nation, is something which might sound very abstract, but actually it is something very grounded in reality, in artifice, which is something which you can appreciate with your five senses. And what is it? The whole concept of nation. I don't know how many of you have heard of this famous social scientist called Benedict Anderson. He was the man who, for the first time, he elaborated upon this whole thing called nation, the concept of a nation. And he said, apart from everything else, a nation is an imagined community. It's an imagined community. We imagine ourselves as a nation. A nation is not just the physical boundaries that you see depicted in maps and so on and so forth. So, and what are these imagined communities? You imagine yourself as part of a community based on certain props to that imagination. And if I assume I'm not overstepping my limit, I would say that cinema, and especially popular cinema, is also one such prop which helps you develop that imagination as a nation. And it was in the pride of their own notion of cinema, their own notion of culture, that propped up this kind of, I would say, arrogance, which actually forbids an outsider entry into their cultural realm without submitting to their notion of what should be and what should not be. So, where does this come from? It's a long history. Of course, all of you would be familiar with the history of the French Revolution and all of that. But what I'm saying is that, when the negotiations for the World Trade Organization were going on, and the WTO proposed that most items of trade should be on the agenda of negotiations, the French and a few other countries, they asked for something called cultural exception. They said you cannot bring the item of culture within the purview of trade. Culture has to be kept away from this purview, and indeed, over the years of negotiation, they had their way, and the result of that is that even today, Hollywood, which has dominated world cinema in a big way, it has dominated the cinema market of the world in a big way, has not been allowed that kind of free entry into France. Now, the French have a regulation. The French have a regulation saying only so much and not more than this. Only so much cinema from outside France can be shown in their theatres. Of course, things are changing today because there's been a revolution in the way we see films. But even so, this has been the norm in France. Now, this might sound abstract, but the fact is that this has brought the French whole bunch of rewards, even in the area of culture, in terms of there being a nation which has probably found the utmost benefit out of this realm of culture, and this is a part. This contributes in a big way to their economy. But as I said, the title of my lecture is Public Discourse, Popular Culture and the Status of Indian Cinema. Now, when we talk about public discourse, the philosopher who comes to mind first is somebody called Michel Foucault. And Michel Foucault, for want of more time, I would just let you know what was his notion of discourse, so to say. He says that basically the use of written or spoken communication to construct knowledge and truth is discourse. And when this happens in the public sphere, when there is no bar to the entry or participation of any individual, then that gets converted into public discourse. So, what is the status of public discourse in our country as far as cinema is concerned? There is a huge paradox here, and the only comparable framework, the only comparable paradigm is with the world of sport that you can find as far as our country is concerned. Now, in cinema, recently, just a few days back, one of our films, one of Indian films, has been accepted as part of the films in competition in the Cannes Film Festival. And there's been so much gaga over this particular success of an Indian film. And my friend Saiful Chatterjee, who's one of the leading film critics of the country, he wrote a 30-year drought has finally been overcome, because the last Indian film to find an entry in the competition section of Cannes Film Festival was Shaji Kapoor's Swah, which was in 1994. After that, there have been films which have been screened in Cannes, but Cannes again has several sections. Competition is just one of them. A Certain Regard is another section, and there are documentary sections, short film sections, and so on and so forth. Director's Fortnight and all that. But the competition section, which is supposed to be the real event, the prime event of, and the most competitive and the most prestigious event of the festival, we have not found entry in that section in the last 30 years. So that is at one end. But what do we do about public discourse as far as our own cinema is concerned in our own country? So, attention to cinema. Forget our conversation. In our newspapers, in our public platforms, and in our television, all these public domains, is so marginal. It's so marginal. You look at any of the so-called prestigious, the so-called prestigious national newspapers, whether in Hindi or in English. I am not talking about that. I will not vouch for what happens exactly in south of India. But you pick up any of the newspapers, and maybe one day in the whole week, or at best a Sunday column included, you will have something on cinema. That one day, of course, is reserved for reviews of new releases and new films and so on and so forth, which they are supposed to create a buzz around that new film. But beyond that, nothing. Beyond that, nothing happens in our public discourse as far as cinema is concerned. I'm talking about cinema and plain cinema. I'm not even talking about quality of cinema. What quality of cinema? So, actually there are no good platforms for serious discussion, serious discourse on cinema. And we talk about us being the nation which produces the largest number of films. You know, so you would imagine any young man who's not familiar with this word can say, well, we are so much ahead of Hollywood. How many films does Hollywood produce? You know, there's a graduate of the institution where I was, the Film and Television Institute of India, a very delightful, very knowledgeable young man who's of course now heading a film institution in the South. He once did a calculation. You know, all our films taken together, and this is of course a little dated, this was in 2006, but the situation has not too drastically changed even since then. All our films taken together, a couple of hundreds, all our films taken together, Hindi, Telugu, Tamil, you know, their budget, can you imagine what it totals up to? It totals up to, he had meticulously calculated, I don't have the time, nor do I want to delve into that territory, but 12 blockbusters of Hollywood, you know, they are equal to all our hundreds of films that we produce in our country in terms of the budget. So that is one part of the whole story. As I said, no serious platform. But even with no serious platform, it need not necessarily preclude serious viewing of cinema, serious discussion around cinema. And you know, if we take a leaf out of the world of literature, for example, you can get into a discussion on your literature or your national literature or your regional literature only if you are literate enough, familiar with that literature. The one word that we use in the world of cinema is film literacy. How film literate is our society? How film literate is our public? So, you know, the Pune Film Institute every summer runs a course called the Film Appreciation Course. It's about a 6 weeks long course. I don't know if they've changed the duration now, but it's a 6 weeks long. It used to be at least a 6 weeks long course where you are provided residence if you are coming from outside. For that 1.5 months, you just see cinema. Experts come, discuss, question answer sessions, and you talk about what good cinema is. But imagine the task. Just one single institution. How many people can it make literate as far as the world of cinema is concerned? I'm sure there are other private and parallel ways of addressing this question, but I do not know how much of it happens because it's not either documented or nor is it there in the public domain. So that is the status of film literacy in our country. So all these go on to circumscribe the limits to our public discourse as far as cinema is concerned. Now we come to the second aspect of this whole thing, and that is popular culture. So how many of you would think that cinema is part of our popular culture? Can I have some hands on this? Okay, I think that's equally divided between yes and no. Well, I would like to put in a bit of a spanner here and say that at least for Hindi cinema is not part of popular culture. Hindi cinema is not part of popular culture. Hindi film songs are part of popular culture. Okay? But Hindi cinema is not part of popular culture, and so the logical question is, how do you define popular culture? How do you define popular culture? Now, popular culture, the first prerequisite is that there should be no barriers to entry for participation in any event related to popular culture. Now, is that so as far as cinema is concerned? No. Even if you are sort of dilly-dallying in your mind, I will just ask you a simple question. Is the entry to a cinema hall free? It is not. It is not. Popular culture is, popular folk songs singing during Holi, for example. Anybody can go and join the party there. You don't need to buy a ticket or anything of that kind. Popular culture is something so much more spontaneous. Classical Hindustani classical recital is not part of our popular culture because, number one, from the other side of the stage, it is not something which is, where entry is available to anyone and everyone. You need to be, you need to have a certain status of accomplishment before you can sing in front of an audience. That is not part of popular culture. And to be on the other side, to be on the side of the audience, that also requires a certain level of accomplishment in terms of understanding and appreciation. I'm not saying understanding in terms of its logic and its semiotics and its grammar and so on and so forth. But at least for appreciation, you need to have a certain understanding of what is happening on the other side of the stage, and if you're part of the audience, it is an imperative. So, by these definitions, Hindi film songs, or for that matter, Tamil film songs, or wherever film songs are popular, they are part of the popular culture. Our Indian cinema, our Hindi cinema especially, is not part of our popular culture. We will have to rid our minds of this notion that it is, and that is where the fallacy lies. That is where we keep wringing our hands, when we talk of, now I am coming to the third aspect of the whole thing, we keep wringing our hands on this whole thing of what is the status of Indian cinema? How do you think the rest of the world regards our cinema? Having had the good fortune of having traveled a little in that world, the only cogent equal parallel I can find for explaining this is that when you want to know who you are, you want to know about yourself, then the easiest thing is to look into the mirror and figure out how you look, what is your personality, what is your deportment like, and so on and so forth. Or you talk to somebody to give you an evaluation of yourself, and so on and so forth. So you need to have a benchmark against which you value yourself, you judge yourself. We do not have that. We do not have that. And in the world of cinema, especially, these so-called festivals are your mirrors. Are your mirrors. You can have your own International Film Festival of India and Kerala Film Festival and so on and so forth. But that doesn't cut much eyes, in terms of your standing in the world. And I am not talking about cinema open-endedly. I have narrowed down my my theme of the lecture, the status of Indian cinema, in terms of trying to speak before you, to you, denizens of Banaras Hindu University, which is one of the top institutions of the country, so that we are able to rid our minds of this notion of, fallacious chauvinism, about our culture and so on and so forth. We need to objectively look at where we are, how competent we are, and where do we stand in the world. Because, as I told you, the French, by resorting to getting that cultural exception being accepted in the World Trade Organization, have benefited to the extent of almost 17% of their overall output, being traded internationally. Just imagine if that cultural exception was not there, where would French economy would have been hit so hard. Of course, they have their red wine and other this thing to sustain them, apart from they saw aircraft and so on and so forth. But that is the kind of link between your force as between your status as a cultural force and its possible returns in the domain of economy. So, as I said, there's a very nice parallel between the world of cinema and the world of sport, as far as public discourse is concerned. In the world of cinema, of course, as I told you, we do not. There is not much coverage in the, at least in the press, in the print, in the world of print journalism, or even audiovisual journalism. But in the world of sport, it's only been now over the last 10-15 years, about 15-16 years, that we have started getting these medals in the Olympics and Asian Games. Of course, we were always winning medals, but even there, our position in the overall tally is to be much below most of these smaller countries. But look at the paradox. As far as public discourse around sport is concerned, you open the newspapers on any particular day, 2 to 3 full pages are devoted to sports. As if we are the biggest sporting nation in the world. Minimum 2 pages. Even a thin newspaper like Indian Express will have at least 2 full pages of coverage on sports. And where are we? Where do we stand? एक वो पीवी सिंधु या बेचारी उसकी जो लड़की है सिल्वर मेडल लाई थी ओलंपिक्स में, तो उसके ऊपर फुल पेज कवरेज एंड सो ऑन सो फोर्थ. दिस प्रज्ञानंद challenging the world champion in chess, full page coverages, as if he was leading Manchester United or some hi-fi event like that. So that is the tragedy, that is the paradox, that is the tragedy of our public discourse. Completely disproportionate attention, disproportionate either way, either over attention like in the world of sport, or under attention like in the world of cinema. So this creates that unfortunate situation where we are not able to judge ourselves, we are not able to find the right benchmark, we are not able to figure out where exactly we are. So I told you about the domain of cultural exception and all that. Again, from the world of sport, the film Dangal, that created so much of a buzz. The famous song there, Hanikarak Bapu. I'm sure you people who seen the film Dangal remember this. But or Chakte India, films made on sports, on areas of sports, where we are not even, forget about world class, we are not even Asian class. So that is the kind of fallacious public discourse that we have created around some of these important aspects of culture. And we need to jump into the fray sooner than later to be able to correct this whole situation, so that we also can take pride in whatever we are creating. And remember that the situation is going to improve only if we have the right kind of public policy meant for all these things. Now, public policy is essentially, all public policy of any worthwhile nature is preceded by public discourse. Today, if India is legislating a certain law, it is always because there is a discussion, there is a demand, and it is discussed not in Parliament first, but amongst the people at large, and then only it goes into the regulatory regime. Now, the world of the creative domain does not necessarily have to be dominated by regulations, because that regulatory domain is in a totally confrontationist relationship with the creative domain. So it is necessary that the right kind of discourse is created for the right kind of end product to come out of the domain that we are looking at. And in this case, in the world of cinema, as I said, film literacy has to precede any viable, any reasonable, any meaningful public policy. And for that, we have to look at what we have created till now in terms of public policy. Well, our most laudable part of public policy is that the world of culture has an allocation of a few percentage points beyond 2%, something like that, in our total budget. So that is the way we look at culture. And if that continues to be the way we look at culture, its contribution to our national pride will continue to be the same way, in the same mode. So, without wasting much of your time, I can only say that, in the world of cinema, we will be able to create world-class cinema, real world-class cinema, only if we have those world-class institutions, and only if we have that public discourse of world-class. And how do we create that? We need to create those institutions. Just imagine a country like ours, 1.4 billion. How many institutions do we have where cinema is taught? How many institutions do you think of a national level do we have where cinema is taught? Can somebody make a blind guess?
Two.
Bolo?
There are two only.
Huh?
सिर्फ दो हैं.
SRFTII and FTII. Yeah, well, you're right, but I would go a little beyond that and say that there are a few private film schools also in Bombay and in Chennai and a couple of.
They are so expensive.
You can count them on your hand. And public institutions, only two of them. And why is a public institution important? Because remember, private institutions, especially in the world of culture, especially in the domain of culture, will always restrict entry. The net that you cast in a public institution for recruiting your subscribers is a far wider one, because it is not limited by the resourcefulness of by the resources of the person, the student who's coming in. So that is why despite all advances in the world of medical science and medical education, some of our best institutions in the world of medical science are public institutions, whether it is All India Institute of Medical Sciences or any of these other institutions that you may think of. And so many of these aims have been created across the country. I do not vouch for the status and the quality of each one of them, but certainly the All India Institute of Medical Science, which is the premier institution in the world of medical science, is a public institution. And it is not a coincidence that even 30 years back, the film which went to the Cannes Film Festival, which entered the competition in the Cannes Film Festival, was a film by an alumnus of the Film and Television Institute of India. Even the one which has been entered this year, 30 years later, Payal Kapadia's film, she herself is an alumnus of a public institution. Another film by a boy from the Satyajit Ray Film and Television Institute has found entry to one of these other festivals, Berlin or Venice, I don't remember exactly. But just one or two here and there. So when you talk about public discourse in public institutions, there is a very tight interconnectedness, and we need to have regulations, we need to have policies which promote, such public institutions across the country, which can give us the right kind of institutions to promote this aspect of our culture. And we have to recognize that this is one aspect of our culture which is so very important. When I was the director of the Film and Television Institute of India, I used to be summoned, as has been the want of the Sarkar all these years since independence. I was summoned and I was asked, why do you need so much money for your budget? Why can't you take a cut in your budget? I said, sir, this is the Secretary of Ministry of Information and Broadcasting. I said, sir, for all I care, you can chop it the way you want. But I just want to make one small point, and that is that a fraction of what you spend on your so-called huge infrastructure projects, and of course I mustered enough courage to tell him that, like you, I am also a civil servant, and I know the reality of these infrastructure projects and how much is siphoned off as leakages in these projects. So just a fraction of that, and you invest it at the right place, gives you so much leverage in terms of your status, in terms of your cultural status across the world. One film today, unfortunately, do you know the biggest paradox is the first Cannes Film Festival, the Golden Palm, their highest award, was won by an Indian film, the Chetananand's Nichanagar. But thereafter there's been a complete drought. No, nothing. Neither the best director nor the best film. Just the entry into the competition, it took us 30 years from Shaji Karun to Payal Kapadia now. And I believe that in terms of her aesthetic knowledge or her aesthetic accomplishments, Payal probably has inherited from her mother, who's one of the leading painters of this country, Nalini Malavi. But that is the status of our cinema in terms of how we compete or where we stand in the world. And it's a very simple paradigm that if you want to improve upon yourself, you need to wrestle with your opponent, as in wrestling, in boxing, as in cricket, as in hockey. That is the reason why these demands come from various coaches, that we need to be sent out to play against top teams and so on and so forth. We need to be sent out to participate in international competitions, because that is how you upscale your ability and you hone your skills and so on and so forth. So in the same way, in the world of cinema also, we need to look at what is happening across the world, and for a simple thing like what is the essence of good cinema, so-called there's a whole world of so-called art house cinema. I would not even go into that domain, but good cinema, when the students come and in their elementary classes, the fundamental definition that is given to them is, in the world of cinema, you don't tell what you can show, and conversely, you don't necessarily tell what you can show, and you don't show what you can tell. So, the most oft heard criticism in the Western world, in the developed world, not Western world, in the developed world, is that Indian cinema is very loud. Well, I do not know what exactly the meaning of the word loud is, but I have a sneaking suspicion that it draws from our ability to sing and dance at the slightest provocation, and think that our film is a great film because we have made so much great music. So, show and tell is the fundamental definition. And another domain where we have been lacking, on this whole question of show and tell, I would advise all of you to see this French film called Amour. Amour in French means love. It's a film made by a director who's amongst my favorite directors. Is an Austrian fellow, Michael Haneke. This film, Amour, is about this old couple. The husband is a retired professor of philosophy, and the wife also does something, I don't remember what she does, but they're very old, and it shows their lives together and their end together in a way which would leave you scarred, which will leave you thinking beyond the ordinary confines of our usual thoughts. And that is the power of cinema. That is the power of cinema. They both die in the end, the husband and the wife. It's a kind of suicide, but it is not. You have to see that film to be able to appreciate, what is the distinction between showing and telling. Such little dialogue in the film, and yet it will keep you gripped all throughout. If you have even the slightest sense of cinema, it will keep you gripped like that. Not that we do not have good filmmakers amongst us, but the question is, you become good only if you are given the opportunity to try out, to judge yourself against the other person. There's a brilliant young filmmaker, again an alumnus of the Film and Television Institute of India, called Gurvinder Singh. Gurvinder also used to be a teaching assistant with Mani Kaul once upon a time, late Mani Kaul, who came to take 2 long master classes during my time in the institute. And then Gurvinder has gone on to become one of our finest filmmakers. You see his film called Chauthi Koot. Chauthi Koot is probably now available on YouTube also. It's a film which he has made on the Punjab militancy. I don't want to demean or want to bring down his reputation. Gulzar Sahab also made a film on Punjab militancy. I'm sure you remember the name. Sorry? Marches, that's right. Yeah. Chappa 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 Chappa. Yeah. Gulzar Sahab also made a film on Punjab militancy. But you see these two films next to each other, and you will find the difference. Again, there's such little dialogue in that film, and of course there is obviously no song and dance, but that is a far more telling commentary on the status of things, on the state of things during militancy in Punjab. So that is the power of good cinema. But appreciation of good cinema again will come not out of nowhere, not out of a complete of being a complete novice in the world of cinema. Appreciation for good cinema will come only when you train your aesthetic lenses on cinema in a way that will give you an understanding of its overall philosophical realm, its overall artistic realm, and its overall narrative realm. So, I think I'm coming to the end of my time. I would only like to say in the end that there's a lot of good that is happening in the interstices of our cultural world, which doesn't come to our notice, and it's the same thing, same story with the world of Indian cinema also. So as curious, simple, curious human beings, you need to delve into those interstices, those realms of our culture, and you will find it of such enriching quality. And that is where the first, bursts of pride in your heart for your great nation will begin to take shape. And this is something which will keep you engrossed all your life. And this is something which you can find in any corner of this country. Thanks to television, you're much richer today. You're much richer, and therefore you have access to not in the same way as you would have access to in Western world, because half the time when you try and source a particular film on Prime Video or YouTube, they'll say, oh, this is either for buy or to rent. And when you go to buy and rent this thing, they will say, oh, this is not probably available in your geography. So those limitations are there, yet we have come a long way from that distant, dreamy world where we used to wait for months together for a new release. And I don't know, not many of you may have gone through that phase of life, but I have as a young boy. We used to hear that Sholay has been released in Bombay, and we would keep waiting for Sholay. It will land in my small town only 2 or 3 months later. You people are far more blessed than that, but don't fritter up your chances. This is your chance to enrich yourself through the cultural medium, and you are, I think, in the right place to be able to do so. All my best wishes for you. Thank you.